Excellent, excellent. Well, why don't we go ahead and get things kicked off? And as people kind of filter in here, everybody should be able to see my screen. And just as a reminder, thank you for joining us today. We record these each week, so it's up to you on whether you want to come on live on a video, or if you prefer to just listen in and chat questions, or just pick up any aspects here. Every week we start with a survey around account-based Fridays, and we try to orient it around the topics that relate to ABM. And this last week was actually with the holiday. This was 2 weeks ago, where we had a question about skill sets. And the question that I had posed was really one around, where do you need help organizationally right now? Is it marketing, sales enablement, other? And this is just a really, really appropriate question, because we've got a very special guest today joining us, Heidi Bullock, who's the CMO of Tealium. And we'll give a more formal introduction in a moment. But I just want to acknowledge and how excited I am, and we'll get into kind of her background in a moment. But one of the questions that we consistently see is this area of, where do I hire next, or can I hire next, or where do I develop next? And I'd be curious, Megan, what you've seen, or what your experiences have been in this area. I know for me, sales enablement's been, and you can see my vote here, sales enablement was the reason why I brought this up. Was we see that consistently in every company right now. It is a major, major issue for companies to kind of get their hands around.
Yeah, well, I'm actually happy to see that sales enablement came out slightly higher than new salespeople, because one would hope that if you have a high degree of hiring need for new salespeople, that you would also be providing them with enablement to help them be successful. I'm a little surprised about the marketing line item there, just because we've had such a shift over to engagement strategies that come from marketing tactics, primarily online now. So I'm a little surprised, but again, I'm assuming that also a lot of companies are repurposing existing marketing roles to take on some new responsibilities. But that leads us over to Heidi, because you've got a really interesting structure over at Tealium at CMO, and you're a multi-time CMO with a great track record of helping organizations build exciting and quality teams, doing some great brand work. We're going to talk about that later. But I would love to just start off, Heidi, if you would just tell us a little bit about your role today and your structure, which includes enablement, and why that's working so well for you. And then from there, maybe talk a little bit about some of your talent development strategies too, that you've had, given, the immense challenges many companies have. You may want to hire these people, these are great things to want to hire, but the reality of actually hiring them has been tremendous lately. So I'd love for you to comment on that as well. But thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah, you bet. I'm happy to be here. This is a lot of fun, and hopefully will help some folks that are listening. So yeah, it's interesting at Tealium. It is a little bit, I guess, not conventional for a CMO to have enablement. But I think for us, something that we recognized early on is, especially in this market, you're trying to hire. I also, just for people listening, I have our SDR team under me as well too. And I think just if we take a step back, our whole goal as a business is to grow, and we want our sellers and everyone in the revenue organization to be successful. And I think if you take a step back, enabling people is probably the number one thing that matters, but it's often what people don't think about a lot, right? They think about, oh, it's technology, that's where I should be spending my time. Or I feel like that's kind of the easy thing. But if you think about it, we want to make sure that we're hiring sellers. And when I say sellers, that's also our SDR team. And we want to make sure that they're super successful. They can hit the ground running. They can feel confident. And to me, that is knowing how to sell the way your business does, right? Because it's not copy paste. Not all businesses follow the same process, right? So that's number one. Number two, how should they be working with their marketing team? Like a lot of companies, marketing isn't thought of as a true partner, right? Which is really important to me. I think of us as a revenue organization. I always tell people we're all in sales. If you don't think that, you're not in the right company or team. So I think that's really critical. And then also, lastly, making sure that they understand and feel successful with the technology in your organization. So I know many people use different ABM solutions. Do all your sellers know how to use that? Probably not. So for me, having enablement has been really exciting. I think it's really important because, again, I want to make sure that the sellers are set up to feel really confident with what they're doing. And to me, a big thing I think about is how can we make things consumable for them, and how can we reduce friction so they can just go sell and it's easy. So I love it, and I think it's been a pretty good thing thus far. We have a ways to go. I mean, as you all know, it's a journey. I'm not going to claim complete success right now, but I think it's a really, really great thing.
I'm curious, Heidi, when you talk about enablement, and especially as the owner, outside of your organization, either at the board or other C-level executives, how do they perceive that need or that change or that investment that you're making to have them be successful?
Yeah, I actually think, unfortunately, and I actually was happy to see your survey data, I don't think people think enough about it. I just don't. I think a lot of companies, if you look at them, enablement's it's almost like an afterthought, or it's almost how I used to view customer marketing. You'd go into a company and it's like, hey, your whole motion's land and expand. And you look to customer marketing, there's like 2 people over there, and you're just like, the demand gen or team is like 50. You're just like, whoa, that doesn't make sense. And enablement in a lot of companies, I think, is an area that there needs to be more investment, and especially in the market we're in today. It is an employee's market. And I think everyone's seeing that across the board. I don't care what industry you're in, hiring people right now is hard. It's very tricky, I think, to go on LinkedIn and say, wow, here's sellers that perfectly fit our business, or marketing people. So enablement, to me, I think should be a big focus for a lot of executives. But unfortunately, I don't see it a lot right now. I think it'll change.
I think you're right, Heidi. I'm seeing this, across a lot of companies right now where they are thinking about it from the perspective of, we've got to get a consistent pipeline of talent, either in and onboarded effectively or upskilled effectively if they're making any kind of a transition, which many companies are right now. So yeah, by all means, I think enablement, but true strategic enablement is very different than just sales training. And I think that's the other thing too, is you may have this sort of historical sales enablement that's actually more like training. That, now we're thinking very differently about what enablement means and what it means to sort of develop people across your revenue function. So that's a challenging one. And I mean, for you too, what are you seeing in terms of the kinds of skills that your team needs to acquire, and what are some of the things you're doing to help them get there?
Right. So if we're just looking at the marketing organization, so I think, in the last few years, I think a lot of B2B, I think we had the whole era of inbound marketing. And again, like marketing automation was a big piece of that. We saw content marketing. I would say like 2012, 2013 kind of was maybe the early beginning of that, where everyone's like, inbound, it's amazing. And then I think everyone started to realize, like, as marketers, we got so great at that motion. We got so good at it, but we're like, wow, we have all these MQLs or this inbound interest that wasn't necessarily converting. And I think, ABM, as we all know, or account-based selling, whatever we want to call it, it's not a new thing. But I think what has been hard is things have moved so fast over the last few years, finding people that have a successful track record running really great ABM programs, meaning maybe they might understand an aspect of a technology platform, but coming in and saying, we're going to put this program into place. We're going to work with RVPs that have, 20 plus years experience. How are you going to get them to do something new? That's hard. So I think something that I've been doing a lot at Tealium is kind of saying, look, let's think about how we can best support our sales leaders. And I've really been working with marketing folks on it really kind of actually a lot of learning on the job. Like, we do a lot of training, a lot of education. And I personally, I'm not suggesting this for everyone, but myself and a few other people, that's what we do a lot of. We do a lot of teaching. Like, this is how we can have a great strategy for our RVPs. We do it kind of by their territory. And almost, if you think about field marketers historically, I think they've often been thought of as like event support for the RVP. And I've sort of modified that role to be like an ABM marketer that's paired for an RVP in region. And their job, I'm like, you have a number, you have a pipeline number, and it's your job to pair with that RVP, his or her team, and that SDR leader, and make that successful. And that's a mix of different things. Now, a lot of those folks, they're not going to have all the skills out of the gate, but that's okay. We'll get them there, and we talk a lot about it. And I think the biggest thing that we've been working on, and that you see, I know a lot, is what's the process? Like, how do we work with that person so we can successfully look at a set of accounts and pursue them? What does that motion look like? What's that day-to-day activity, weekly activity, monthly activity look like? So for better or for worse, it's training. It's just like early on with, marketing automation, all of us were like, great, we've got this technology, but no one knew how to use HubSpot, Marketo, Eloquent. You had to teach people. And so a lot of success I've seen bringing in a certain type of person that's enthusiastic. They love learning. They're excited. I mean, these are just great qualities across the board, and you get them in, and none of this stuff is rocket science. I'll tell people who are listening, I mean, so much is available on SlideShare online around processes. And it's just about kind of making sure that you bring in people, they understand that selling is part of their job. And that to me is a really critical piece. It's not like marketing is over here doing something and sales. It's like, no, we're all a revenue team. But it is a lot of training on the job.
Yeah. I think that's so important, though, and especially companies invest thousands every year, right, in their sellers, but there's often not a corresponding investment in marketers when, the world of marketing is changing just as much as the world of sales, and they need to change together.
That's right.
So I love that you're really thinking about that as a revenue team and as a shared number and as also a shared opportunity to upskill. That's great.
But your point about learning, and this is like something that's so critical, all of these areas, they're so dynamic, like marketing operations, like it's so dynamic. It's like, you're not going to find somebody that's like, I'm an expert on all of that out of the gate. It's like, so I guess what I would tell everyone is you can't expect these perfect snowflakes to just arrive. Great, we brought them in and they're going to be able, that just doesn't happen. And it's on you as an organization to help your team be successful and give them that training, give them those opportunities. And I think learning is also what keeps you for retaining employees as well. No one wants to get stagnant. That's not fun. You don't want to be doing the same thing all the time. So I think providing learning opportunities is really important.
Megan and I were talking earlier about you as you were joining. We're like, oh, this is great because Heidi's got an unbelievable branding background, which we definitely want to get to. We got so little time here. Maybe before we get there, you had mentioned something really interesting about the process of ABM, and both Megan and I play around and process quite a bit. And with everybody home right now, working remotely, change management is pretty challenging, at least with our clients. What are you experiencing there in terms of what's working, what's not working as you're going through your own ABM journey, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I think you're so right. I mean, we're all on Zooms, all the time, 24/7. And for me, that's not how a lot of sellers really love to operate. I think, especially in enterprise B2B marketing, enterprise sellers love that personal touch and relationship. I mean, that's just a fact, right? And so I'll kind of answer it in two ways. I think right now, just with the pandemic, that part's been hard because I think, you're not having these really great on-site meetings or doing events at a dinner where everyone's like, hey, we're having some wine, you're getting to know somebody. And it's like, that's how relationships are made. And that's a critical piece of selling. And so I think we've been trying to mimic that, just like many people. It's not like it's so original or novel, but kind of trying to take the field event and making it virtual and really bringing people together, making it fun. It doesn't all have to be about facts and technology all the time. Maybe it's like a whiskey tasting or something. So that's been a piece of it. But just more on the operational side of things, we have what we call account stand-ups. John Miller has done a lot of thinking around this too, and it's very documented. But meeting, kind of almost having like a small group where it's your SDR leader, your marketing person, your sales leader, and going through their key accounts weekly, I think is a great cadence. And really looking at, where are you seeing engagement with an account? Are the reps following up? Are they seeing success? Or where maybe you can see accounts where they've been reaching out a lot. People have been trying tons of things, but engagement is somewhat flat. You're not seeing responses. They're not getting back to you. So that's something marketing needs to act on. And I think just kind of having this pod that attacks these accounts together is such a critical thing. And to me, John, that's been the hardest thing to put in place, but also the most successful. And we basically will go through those accounts, and we use a combination of tools to collect the data, look at it, and run through it. But it's been really working for us at Tealium.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, John Miller is our guest next week. So
ask him about it. Because I think it's something that both of us have seen, at our time at Marketo and other companies, where we're just like, you can't do this in a silo. It can't be marketing's over here and we sent the direct mail. Sales is over here making their calls, and SDRs are, it's like, no, you have to coordinate, because you're trying to get into an account that you've identified, you've selected, and it's a buying group. You're not just trying to reach one person in that account. So it's almost like, how can you collectively think through that?
Yeah. Well, and like you said, it's really about starting with the customer, right? What's their experience? What's their need? What are you trying to create for them? And how are you trying to engage them holistically across all the different opportunities that you have? And I think one, John just alluded to this, but one that you've done, I think personally think an excellent job at in multiple companies, is creating a really positive environment for the brand that then draws people in to want to be part of that account-based experience. And I think sometimes people make a false trade-off. It's either branding or, demand or ABM. It's like, I would argue actually in an ABM setting, that brand presence and preference is so critical. I'd love to hear how you've thought about that. And especially maybe tell us a little bit about your journey at Tealium with that. I think they've done some really great branding work.
Thank you. Thanks. I feel like it's an ongoing journey, as you know, but for me, again, I think just like if you go back in history, I think it's like marketers were often thought of as like, you think of sort of like the Mad Men era, and it's like ads. And then then it kind of shifted to being like very metrics driven. We can measure everything. And I think, it's unfortunate, like you sort of have seen these extremes. And I think people are really realizing that, to me, I kind of refer to it as like, it's like a taco. Like brand is like the shell around all the insides. And if you don't have that shell, it's not a taco, it's just a bunch of stuff. And so to me, it's like, you need both unequivocally. Like to me, brand in the simplest of terms, it's how you show up. When you think about, like, you see it really clearly in consumer marketing, we all like ice cream, but for some reason you're going to go, there's all ice cream. You go in the freezer section, there's so many, but it's about preference. Why am I picking one over the other? And you have to make sure as a company you're thinking about that. And specifically with ABM, why? Because we're pursuing accounts. It's not like an executive showing up to your website. Great, let me download this ebook. John, I'm so excited to talk to you, right? Like that isn't what's happening. These people are incredibly busy. They're inundated. And so they have to have a sense, who is this company? What are they about? And so then when you have an SDR reaching out, or a salesperson like, oh, I've heard of Tealium. Yes, absolutely. And they have some perception of you. So for me, it is absolutely critical that you have a very, I think, a clear brand, something that, again, I sort of have the saying, you can't be all things to all people. And you see in a lot of tech companies, they're like, I want to be this and I want to be that. But the truth is, no, it's like, you're not going to be the ice cream that is Ben and Jerry's loaded with cookies and then super, great for dieters. Like, no, like you have to make a choice. And I think for us at Tealium, that's something I've thought a lot about. It's like, we were very early on in the CDP space, but I think, we have a great reputation in some other areas as well. And I think people have kind of known us for one area, but I've been really trying to illustrate, like, look, this is what we are really good at. And we're very, very strong with being open and integrations. Like, to me, it's that flexibility that I want to have come across, and that we've been doing it for a while. We work with a lot of big companies and we're very trusted. So I've been really trying to think about those key qualities and telling that story. And a lot of this is making sure we can tell the story in a way that, again, is consumable and makes sense to people for our key audience. So and as you know, Megan, that's not something that you do. You don't do that in a week or a month. It's a journey and it takes time. So,
yeah, I'm so glad you brought up focus, because I think I have this conversation all the time. Strategy is what you say no to, and it's all about being successful in any model, account based or otherwise, is really about saying, who are we and what do we want to focus on, and then building from there. And I think not having that clarity is when you end up with people arguing about what a waste of money branding is. Right.
You end up with weird things though. It's just weird. Like you think about it's like, we can name a few restaurants that do this, and you open the menu and you're like, wow, how can you have pizza and then wontons? Like, I don't think so. Like, right. And it's just like, it's not working. And so I think it's, if people walk away with something from this, it's like, yes, brand and your story matters, because it's like, that's how you show up as a company, right? That's from when somebody interacts with your SDR. Was that a good experience for them? Like they're going to have some feeling about that, right? They go to your website. Is it clear? Can somebody understand what you're about? Like there are all these touch points before, that process is even kicked off. So it really, really matters with ABM.
Yeah. And I would say too, it continues into post-sale, right? Where you're thinking about what's the experience you're delivering right after somebody buys, and what do they think about that? Because that's when you're starting to build that, sort of positive, virtuous cycle of great brand experience, great buying experience. And then if it falls off a cliff right after they buy, then you don't get the benefit of the advocacy coming back in. That's what Winning by Design calls customer-led growth. Right. Where you've got this idea of you get customers to impact, they will sing your praises and they will reinforce your brand. But at the same time, if you mess that up, they'll tear your brand down, and they should, because it's not accurate.
That's right. And they'll do it fast. And it's like, yeah, absolutely. And I think what you highlighted here is really important, because a lot of organizations, if you are thinking about ABM or using ABM, a lot of that reason is because your motion is going to be a land and expand. A lot of it is customer-led growth. And we saw that a lot this last year in the pandemic. I mean, so many people are like, we're doubling down on customers. And we all know this. It's like, it's my favorite analogy. It's like marriage. The work kicks in when you're married, right? It's like that experience better stay good. You can't be like, oh, we're so fun and exciting and skiing every weekend, and then you get married and it's like, hey, we're just like playing Scrabble. No, like that doesn't work. And it's the same with a company, right? You can't, just be so delightful, then somebody becomes a customer. It's like, oh, I can't get a hold of anybody. I can't get my questions answered. Gosh, I need more help. I can't find it in their learning center, whatever you may have. So your point there is so important.
Yeah.
All this talk on food.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
I was just gonna say all
food.
Yeah, all that talk on food. I'm like, I have to mute because you're gonna hear my stomach grumbling. So great analogies, though. Fantastic analogies. Just thinking about the branding, and we all have a passion for the measurement of marketing. How do you suggest somebody measure the impact of the brand side of things? Because it's just so it's squishy in B2B, but how would you think about that?
Yeah. So I think there's, not a perfect answer for this, but I think what frustrates me is when people are like, you just can't measure brand. And I don't believe it. I actually think you can. And what I will say is it's not a perfect science, it's directional. But when I joined Tealium, one of the things I did is we reached out and we actually did a survey to analysts, friendlies, customers, even people that, were not in our cycles at all, and said basically a simple set of questions like, when you think of Tealium, what comes to mind? And got a sense of it. Was it, wow, you are flexible and you work with a lot of different technologies? Is it that you're trusted? What are the elements that come to mind, right? And a few other questions. So we did sort of a baseline, and we've been running, some initiatives and brand campaigns. And then basically we're going to do that same survey in 6 months and a year. And we've done this a little bit already to look at kind of key shifts. So that's kind of one metrics kind of driven way that we've looked at our initiatives. We've also looked at where we put out certain messages through content. What does that engagement look like versus other messages, and getting a sense of that. So kind of like using a volume and a lot of data to kind of get that sense, but also asking people, talking to people frequently, analysts, your customers, what do you think? Is this working? We do a lot in app too. We use a tool called Pendo to get a baseline. We don't bombard people with this, but I just want to get a sense of like, is what we're saying, is it resonating? Because what you see a lot is internally people like, this is us. You see this with companies all the time. We're awesome. People think of us as this. And then you ask customers or, just the, people that are in deal cycles, and it's like, no, that isn't, we actually think of you as this other thing, which could be great, but you just don't want that to be at odds with each other. You want to have an honest view. So those are some of the things we do, but I think it's like, try to just ask people, and you can do it, even have your salespeople ask. And I definitely use the analysts a lot for that as well. I think they will tell you.
Well, and I think that's sort of an untapped resource for a lot of marketing leaders and a lot of product leaders too, right? I think people get nervous about asking analysts honest questions because they feel like they've always got to put their best foot forward, or the analyst is going to be judging them. I mean, I can tell you on behalf of many an analyst, we love it when people come to us with genuine questions and want advice and want input. And that reflects favorably on you as a leader and your brand, that you are open to asking a hard question and listening to feedback. And sometimes you'll hear things you don't like, but it's not going to hurt you, down the road in ratings or rankings. Like it actually can help,
Right.
So especially if you take their advice.
And how would you get better? Right. It's almost like you have to like really make sure, like for me with any new role and just for people out there, it's like, you want the ugly. You've got to be the kind of person that's like, I want to see it, because if you don't know what's there, you can't fix it. And so I think just, kind of going back to brand though, I do feel like it's not necessarily one thing. It's not just like web traffic, did that go? But it's like a composite of different things. And to me, what I would tell anyone is get a sense of that, take some sort of baseline so you have something you're measuring against, and track it over time. Look at sentiment. There's a lot of ways of doing it, but I will say you absolutely can measure brand, and it's not this absolute, it's not like calculus homework, but it's directional. And I think that's what people need to look at.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think a lot of people do get sort of hung up on what they can and can't measure with brand. And so they kind of stay away from it. But to your point, if you put together that sort of market basket of measures and say directionally, this tells us where we're going, that starts to look a little more official and a little more like something you can put in front of your leadership team and your board to say, here's what this investment is netting for us.
That's right. That's right. And you need some sense of it. You can't say like, oh, we just spent all this money on billboards on the 101 and no idea. Like it's like, it's your job as a marketer to get it figured out. So,
yeah. Well, and when you go in as a new marketing leader, what are sort of the first 3 things that you do? Just maybe to close out the conversation today, just generally, thinking about brand, talent, whatever, what are the first 3 things you do?
First one is, and it's such a unique opportunity when you're new because you don't have all the bias yet. You don't have all the history. So my first thing is I just really try to observe and listen. Mm-hmm. And listening is a really important thing. I don't just mean like hearing, but really listening to what people are saying and observing. And I just take tons of notes. Like I kind of hear what the team's saying, what I kind of get a sense of what the challenges are. So I just listen. I go to a lot of meetings and I listen. I really try to meet with, in marketing, definitely like anyone that touches revenue. So customer success, sellers, I try to meet with key people and get a sense of like, what are they struggling with? Like, and then I really try to look at like, what is the data telling me? What am I seeing? Do we have a pipeline problem? Do we have an awareness problem? Is it like retention's horrible? Because I think as a marketer today, like you can be overwhelmed fast. It's like kind of like we were saying about like menus at certain restaurants. You're like, whoa, like why is there 10 pages? This is free, like crazy. And I think it's really good to kind of make sure that you can get your quick hits and then you have your long-term projects. Because I think, these roles, CMOs are expected to come in and do a lot. You're not getting that role just because they're like, oh, whimsically, we need this person. They're like, we have a challenge. And I think it's making sure the challenges they've told you match what you're seeing, because sometimes that's not always the case. So you want to kind of make sure like, yeah, they said there was maybe an awareness problem. Yes, that's matching what I'm seeing. So you can start to attack that. And then you can start to stack rank all the other things, because there's always lots of things, but it's fun that you have to be somebody that likes problem solving.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I know we're just about at time. Heidi, thank you so much. And I put a link to a really cool ice cream contest, because you mentioned Ben & Jerry's and like having big chunks of cookies in them. And that was one of the main things they looked for in the contest, did you make the ice cream like in true Ben & Jerry's brand style? So I'll share that link. It's really fun. Clash of the Cones. But thank you for joining us and for reminding me about that show. And John Russo, anything to close today?
No, Heidi, great content. Thanks for the early morning. And next week we have John Miller. So it's like a 1-2 punch